Hello and welcome back to Film Talk, and better yet said,
Rara La Cosa. Ooh, we did it! First try.
So let's talk about it. Spooky season, part 2, Electric Boogaloo. Season 2 of Stranger Things specifically. We are talking all the things. What better way to introduce this other than the season has rights, and we're gonna tell you why.
And now for the super cool animated intro that a lot of people like to watch. Hey everyone, welcome back to Film Talk, a podcast where two gals talk film, television, and everything in between the reels. I'm your host, Eliana Melendez, and I am joined here today by my ever so lovely co-host, Miss Josie Melendez, and we are filming together, which is not a sight you see every single day. So, we are back with Rara La Cosa to talk about season 2 during our spooky season Stranger Things recap series that we're doing every day until November 6th, which is Stranger Things Day. So stay tuned every week so that you can catch us revisiting a show that we really love, and it's just such a widely beloved show, and honestly has been so much fun to rewatch, especially during Halloween. And season 2 was a really interesting one to follow up with how much we raved about season 1, because like you said earlier, season 2 has rights.
Season 2 is bitchin'.
It is bitchin'. If you couldn't tell already, she's 11, I'm 8. We're trying to channel, the essence of each season as we go on. Last episode she was Mike, and I stand by that.
God damn it.
So, Josie, as our resident, season 2 defender, let's talk about it.
I think I was gonna leave this for later, but let's open with it. Season 2 does get a bad rep. It is one of the seasons that promoted the whole Stranger Things should have ended with season 1.
Right.
Which honestly, I love season 2. Re-exploring it, you like it too a lot, and it's mostly because it's a good season.
Obviously.
And a lot of people hate on it because of episode 7, which, let's talk about it. The cold open sets up episode 7.
Yeah. Talking about, the cold open sets up not only episode 7, but it just kind of sets the tone. It just brings us back with a good old car chase, because it was honestly a good car chase. And yes, it is perhaps a little bit jarring to get a cold open that we don't get back to until 7 episodes later, but also all of these episodes drop on the same day. So we all know that we were watching it, throughout the weekend when it came out. But yeah, I think, again, it brings us back to Hawkins, Indiana. It brings us back to our beloved characters set a year later after the first season. And we get to see Will, and his family still recovering from the trauma of season 1. And, at rewatching it, I realized, shit, wait, Will's barely in Stranger Things in the first season. Noah Schnapp actually snaps off in season 2. I hated that just as much as all of you listening. Don't worry about it. So, yeah, I think it's really Will's season.
Yeah.
And it remains Will's season until I think season 5 is going to bring us back to that. With 11. I think 11 and Will are kind of a dyad of the Force.
Yeah. Because season 3 kind of plays around with it, because it's the first time that, and we'll discuss this obviously in that episode, it's the first time that he actually gets to be normal. Yeah, that's why he has so many frictions with so many of the other people in the groups, because all like they're being teenagers, they're young, they're getting in like pairings and all that, and he's left to himself because of course, no matter what they say, Will is queer. So
Will's been queer since episode 1. They've been hinting at it
So that's
since
the
the
thing.
first
So
episode.
that's the thing. In season 2, we really dive into the trauma because, of course, this season takes away a lot from The Exorcist. And that's what he goes through. He goes through a possession from the Mind Flayer, and all of the trauma that's built up from first season and the second season like rises to like the maximum point in this one, and then season 3 like deals with that in a better sense. Then season 4 is like the most normal season for him, which is great.
So wild. It took all of that.
But yeah, like with all this conversation about season 3 and 4, which we will discuss later, but I'm mentioning it because Will is such an important character. The entire show revolves around his presence. He is the catalyst of the show. And
because people, you normally you would think 11 is like basically the star of the show, but truly Will is just as, if not more important than 11.
Yeah, like you can't have the show without either of them. If you don't have 11, you don't have the show. But also, if you don't have Will, you don't have a problem. And which is not to say that Will is a problem. It's just that the world is testing him.
The world is testing him, and he didn't study,
and he needs a break because he's just a kid. And now that we're talking about it, just spitballing here because this is a conversation. Before I forget, one thing that I found very interesting is that at the end of season 2, and I know I'm jumping, but like I just want to discuss it because at the end of season 2, talking about queerness, when all of the kids are getting asked out at the snowball, Will gets asked out and he freaks out, and the first person he looks at is Mike, and Mike is like, go. And I'm like, I paused it. I had to go back, and I'm like, he literally, like, Will turns to Mike because he does not. You would think that it's just a small boy just being like, no, I don't want to dance. Oh my God, I'm so nervous. Because also, like, he is a shy kid. He's very reserved, so it's understandable within his character. But also the fact that he just makes straight eye contact with Mike, and Mike is like, go dance with her. And I'm like, knowing what we know now, I'm like, they can't, and I will not be gaslit.
Listen, they are Luca and Alberto, and you cannot tell me otherwise. Because we always talk about like Will, Will's not exactly one to pine over Mike. He is very, very close with Mike, and he depends on Mike. Mike is the most fierce protector of Will, especially in this season. Like, he screamed and fought for him constantly. I mean, even from season 1, he always believed that he was out there and he was alive. But in season 2, Mike was like the main person, if not the only person, to really notice and see Will be not okay and be concerned and take care of him.
Which was also from a selfish standpoint, because Mike was obviously super peeved because Max is trying to infiltrate the group, quote unquote, and he misses 11. So he holds on to him. That's not a bad thing, because it's also very curious that there is such a connection between the two of them, considering that in season 1, Dustin is like, oh, like, Lucas and you, like, you're best friends. Like, I get it. I'm not taking it personally because I joined the group way later. But also in this season, in one of my favorite scenes, which we'll discuss a little bit more later, they're trying to remind Will of who he is. And Mike has so many memories with him that it's like there's a genuine connection and, like, love and care there.
Yeah, like, you could say it's brotherly love, maybe for Mike, but, like...
Because Mike is also such a clueless fuck.
He really is. And Lucas tells him in season 1, he's like, you are so oblivious. And that's, there's just people like that. And it makes it interesting.
Also tells him, so...
Dustin, honestly.
I mean, he's clearly oblivious if he showed up to California dressed like that.
Drag her, slay her, sipping on that true tea, hunty. Gag.
Everybody makes fun of it. I'm not the only one.
You didn't have to drag him 2 episodes earlier. Ahead of schedule? Oh my God. But yeah, I think season 2 is also a focus season, because we do focus on Will trying to readjust and heal from his trauma, and it's really freaking impossible for him. And then on the other side of the card, like, again, on the other side of Will, we have 11, and we explore 11 trying to adjust to actually, for the first time, being a child and having a true parental figure in her life. not just, you know, some authority that was controlling her, but an actual parent. So seeing that relationship bloom with her and Hopper, and it just, you know, it's not peaches and cream from the first day. She's a spoiled brat. He also has his traumas, that his damage that he's dragging on and projecting onto her. And they're both people that have experienced loss and are trying to deal with that in their own way as they find a way to, you know, have a parental, you know, parent-child relationship. So it's really interesting to see that, though they don't share as much screen time as they do in season 3. There is still that very, very clear connection between those two characters. Yeah. Joyce still turns it the fuck up here. Let's, you know, and obviously not, she doesn't get the spotlight as much as she does in season 1, but it's with reason. She has to share it with Will, and that dynamic between them just really, really cements Noah Schnapp and like Winona Ryder as like the best actors of the show, in my opinion.
And she did win an award for the Fangoria like Chainsaw Awards, if I'm not mistaken. That's the title, which I just read because I wanted to know if they got some more recognition with the season. And there was more attention after season 1, which is good. I mean, we've seen it. It's clear. Before we jump into Jane and Jim, 8. So we start with a car scene and we introduce 8. The Lost Sister, which is episode 7 or chapter 7, if you prefer that.
We're gonna be bougie about it.
And we see her journey and her relationship with 11 and how they used to be kids, which I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what happened to her, considering what we've seen in season 4.
Right.
I really want to know where they're going because it would really hurt me if they just took her out completely, and this is where I'm going with this. Season 2, I think, is one of the least liked of Stranger Things because of racism.
I think season 2 has the most POC. It has the most black people in
Season 2,
the entire freaking series.
Season 2
and
has
like, and nobody likes it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We're just saying it as we see it. Season 2 has the most black people. It adds more background to Lucas. It also
and his family.
We introduce Erica, who is like a fan favorite from there on out. And we actually, like, in general, more of the parents show up. We see more of their relationships, and we're able to expand on that because we already have the luxury of knowing these characters. But specifically, like, even Lucas, he has that little conversation when they dress up as Ghostbusters for school. He's like, why do I have to be the black character? Because I'm black.
Winston, yeah.
And just that whole conversation. So at least the Duffer Brothers were self-aware and they tried to remedy it, but then...
They weren't it was like their first attempt at not making this story colorblind because Lucas is like the only black kid, aside from his sister, in this whole neighborhood in the 1980s. And that still has its repercussions. There is still a historical context and a socio-historical context there that shouldn't really be ignored, because then that would just kind of be blissful ignorance,
which we do see with Billy.
Yes,
which a lot of people tend to, like, I don't know if it's ignoring it or simply forgetting the fact of how he treated Lucas in that season, and it was very implied. This is one of the most aggressive and most violent seasons considering everything that's happened in these 4 seasons, but we do see Billy just being super aggressive with Lucas and his commentary, and then you're like,
it's being outwardly racist.
Yeah,
to
this
him.
dude's racist.
This dude's racist, and Max like acknowledging that and not saying, "Oh my God, Billy, stop being racist." Like, no, like genuinely telling
afraid of him.
She's afraid of him, and genuinely trying. As much as she tries to pretend that she doesn't really care for Lucas, she genuinely tries to protect him from her brother.
And she talks about it. Like, sorry if I'm a jerk. I'm just angry I guess I'm angry all the time too, because it's not fair. The living situation is not good, and it gets worse in season 4. But closing the point of that whole aspect of this conversation is that we see it a lot with Kenobi. Right. We see it with Rings of Power. We saw it with The Last Jedi.
Even House of Dragon. So every time you have people of color in, a more of a fantasy sci-fi setting, a little bit more of a fandom series or movie.
Prey. Prey wasn't released in theaters.
Prey wasn't even released in theaters, and it did so well. And it was on Hulu. So, you know,
Yeah.
imagine that.
So my whole thing with this is bring back 8. Please.
I think 8 really does fit into season 5's narrative somehow,
I've been
because it was
waiting
the
for her.
first time that we actually got to see that there were more kids like 11, which really expanded the lore for you know, the Hawkins lab
Mhm.
and that whole operation there with Dr. Brenner. So, you know, I think 8 is still out there, and especially, you know, with the upside down bleeding into the, you know, our world.
Mhm.
I think if there were any time to have like an Avengers, you know, team up moment,
And
it would be
it's-
season 5.
Yeah, and it's clearly just her from what we know, because at least in season 4 they kind of retconned everything by murdering all the kids, the younglings,
Yeah.
and
The younglings?
Yeah, the younglings.
But that's the thing, she escaped before that.
yeah, but that's I need to rewatch, because that like it has me confused with the timeline. The way that they're changing things with season 4 has confused me a bit with where the show is going in terms of the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just ready for it to all come out and then me go back and like trace it on my own.
She's gonna do the conspiracy theory,
Yeah.
red string, and all that. But like, I genuinely think because 8 had said, one day you just stop coming to the rainbow room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was because 11 was like, you know, she was still little because 11's younger.
Yeah.
And Dr. Brenner had like taken her under his wing because he noticed that
Yeah.
she was more powerful.
Also-
because 8 doesn't have the same powers.
Exactly. So also like in season 4 we do see all the other kids, but all the other kids that are with 11 and are kind of bullying her
Or that have the same powers.
have the same powers, and she doesn't. So maybe she was like in another room, or like you know, all that.
And she did
jazz.
escape. She did escape a lot
Yeah.
earlier because of that, because of her powers. But I feel like that's like a way to make sense of it. Duffer Brothers, you can, you know, take note.
Yeah. Anyways, this is why we're discussing it. Bring her back. That's all we want to say. So
Bring her back.
going back to Jim and Jane, really loved it. JJ really loved their dynamic. I thought it was very wholesome, and that reveal, and also when he's dancing and they're like sprucing up the house. I love Jim Hopper, and
Just, David Harbour is just so
he's so
infinitely
good.
charismatic.
That's why season 3 just hurt me so much, and we'll get into that. Like, I'm getting emotional right now because I remember season 3 hurt me. I remember I rewatched season 3 twice the same day it came out.
Jesus.
Because I love these characters. No, that's the thing. It just goes to show, like, the show, it's very comforting. You get these characters, especially, like, David Harbour puts so much into Jim Hopper. And yes, he's super flawed. Anti-Hero by Taylor Swift plays in the background. Because he's also just a character you can relate to, because self-loathing. He has such self-loathing for himself, but he still tries to help and he still tries to protect. And we see that later on with Eddie Munson, which I'm like, I don't know why he sacrificed himself, but even despite a whole town going after him, he's still willing to like protect it. And then we see that also with Bob, who like clearly
Bob and not the Builder.
Bob, not the Builder or the Minion. Bob in this season, he talks about it like he was Bob the Brain, and he's like so like simping over Joyce, like I had Joyce Byers. I'm like, look at me, I'm dating her now.
Back
He
to
was-
baddie.
Yeah, he was the founder of the AV Club. So
Just a grade A simp. Sean Astin, you absolute legend of a man.
so all these characters that just were bullied or made fun of growing up, or have just been ostracized by the society, or just like made fun of in general,
The
because
misfits.
because a lot of people are like, Jim Hopper, he doesn't do anything for anyone. Like, he's like sucks as a cop or like a detective and like a chief. But then look at him, like, and like
More than a cop, he's a dad.
yeah, and then
Getting that on a t-shirt.
he gets so freaking surprised when people actually showed up at his funeral, and that gets me every time.
Yeah.
But again, that's moving on forward. Yeah, I just really like their dynamic this season. Because it's flawed, but it's real. It's these two people that are
very real. It's very much, even if, you know, they've only been living with each other for a year, showed very much a classic father-daughter dynamic, even if that was his biological daughter he'd raised her whole life, you know? Very, very relatable stuff here, you know?
It just has beautiful irony, because he's teaching her how to communicate. He's teaching her Morse code. He's teaching her just so many things, words, like vocabulary, grammar, etc. He's being more than a dad. He's being a teacher.
Yeah,
and
he's teaching her how to be a human.
And yet, like, despite all those ways that he's showing her how to communicate with each other, but also with the world, if their communication sucks. Because they're not really
But it's
seeing each other.
charming.
Exactly. They're just not really seeing each other. So I'm just saying I love how human it is.
Yeah. I genuinely think that it is such a good dynamic. And, you know, once again, power of twos here. We have their parent-child dynamic, and then we have Joyce with Will, because Joyce is also very overprotective, but she's, you know, with more than enough good reason right now, especially because of everything that's happened. And, you know, she is the most in tune with Will as a human being, truly, because you know, that's her kid. And, you know, yes, she is very close with Jonathan, but she knows that Will needs that extra help and that extra love, because he has been through some shit. He's a sensitive kid. He is a very, very smart kid. And again, everything that he's been through and everything he deals with, and the way that he tries to be more mature than he probably should have to be for his age, she has to, she tends to try to be in tune with that. And I think that dynamic of, especially in this season where we get those Exorcist vibes, where he is possessed, where he is kind of, you know, he's the face of that we have for the villain, because we don't really see the mind flayer here like we do in season 3 later on. The mind flayer is, you know, manifesting itself through Will. So Will does become, am I the bad guy? Am I the drama?
Am I the drama?
Will season 2, am I the drama? But, like, getting back to that, having to see Joyce come to terms that, like, Will is not entirely there, and she has to make some really hard choices. Like, when she had to knock him out because he didn't, you know, he couldn't convince her, because she is not so easily convinced. Because the Mind Flayer was really depending on her just being a very, you know, blind mother. Like, and the Mind Flayer did the worst thing possible. Underestimate Joyce freaking Byers. Are you kidding me? You're gonna try and trick her? The woman who literally spoke to Christmas lights? Saying that her kid was still alive even though she saw a body? Come on, man.
Yeah. And
Be serious.
Be real, not sponsored. So the thing is that with this season, Noah Schnapp, as you said earlier, snapped.
He snapped.
He snapped. He's the MVP of the season. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think we don't give enough credit to child actors, and Noah Schnapp wasn't as present in season 1 and yet gave a great performance.
Oh yeah.
All the child actors, they've just done such a great job. But season 2, going back to that specific moment when the demodogs are going into the lab and Joyce is like, who am I? You see it in his face. Like, he's like the mind, like you immediately know the mind flayer is trying to access his memories because he probably doesn't give a fuck. And he's like, your mom, trying to convince her. And she's like, my kid is still in there, but he's not talking right now. I'm not talking with my child. I'm talking with a freaking demon. And so she knocks him out, and all these things.
Heartbreaking. Like, I felt for her. I'm like, imagine having to do, like, knock your own kid out. Like, you know, perhaps it's not, like, the most serious thing ever, but they just grabbed a random fucking needle.
It's not worse than freaking Nancy freaking poking him with the poker.
That's true.
She literally said, bye, bitch.
But Nancy's a little more hardcore. Yeah. Nancy's an eldest daughter.
Yeah, because they were turning out the heat, because of course they have to make the host uninhabitable. And Jonathan is there crying into Nancy's shoulder, and Nancy is like, I'm finishing this. Your mom has a point.
Yeah.
Blah, blah. And then he left.
Yeah. Be gone, thought.
Yeah. But what else? Bob. Let's talk
Aston,
about it a little bit. Another MVP of the season, really like came in, do what he had to do, and left a very sad departure.
Yeeted.
He did not leave. He did not exit the stage. He just stayed there.
The stage exited for him.
He just stayed there for all of us to see, and I was like, oh, how dare they? I remember the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh my god, they murdered. The demodogs were feeding. Yeah. That was brutal. I remember a lot of people were like, yo,
Jesus.
Stranger Things, what the heck?
No, Stranger Things, like, you know, when you rewatch it after a while, you're like, wait, Stranger Things is pretty freaking mature.
Yeah.
It is really, like, I wouldn't let, like, really, really, really young kids watch.
No.
Like, younger than 10, 11 years old, I wouldn't let them.
That's pushing it.
Well, that's because of me.
Yeah.
Because I saw The Grudge at, like, 9, and that was not a good idea.
No.
Sean Astin being cast in season 2 was just the creme de la creme, cherry on top.
The fact that people were like, oh, you mean the guy from Stranger Things? And it's like, respect his name. He did not lead Frodo to Mordor and save his life from greed for nothing.
That and just calling him the guy from Lord of the Rings. The dude from freaking Goonies?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? The little belly dance?
Which they freaking recognize him for that
Yeah.
in the season. And I like...
It's honestly, he's so fun. He's such a fun actor. I honestly wish I could meet him someday. I think because he's such a legend. Because he knows he's, you know, he is the MVP in supporting characters.
Yeah.
And I think supporting characters are just as important. And I don't think that they should be just forgotten.
He was just so kooky. He had fun. I mean, when he's like dressed as a vampire, he's like victims. And then just goes to the door for the
But he was also
trick-or-treaters.
useful. That's the
Yeah.
thing. He wasn't just there to
Let's-
be, you know, goofy.
Let's talk about it. He goes to the house, brings games for Will.
Because he wants Will to feel better.
When Jonathan is like, he's staying over now.
Oh,
He's just
God.
there. But when he shows up and all this craziness is happening, and he's questioning it, but he's not stopping them. He's not gaslighting her like her ex-husband. He's still being supportive, but obviously not going in blind. He still has questions because he's an inquisitive person. But como yo te había mencionado el otro día, and we were talking about this, and
Right.
I love how you said, like, I mean, podría ser described as un bobolón.
He could
But
be
he's
bobito,
brave.
but
But he's
that's the
brave.
thing. He's not an idiot. He's just he's soft. Yeah, he could be kind of just, you know, kind of too innocent and too nice for his own good, but he is brave. He's a courageous, trustful person. And I think that's what really makes him the MVP here. And I don't know, man. I think his relationship with Joyce was really interesting, though. Joyce, here's another balance, little power balance here. We explored Joyce trying to heal from her own trauma with Bob. So Joyce and Bob are actually like a very, very realistic relationship. But it wasn't toxic. I think
Aw.
Bob was really good for her to also
why
come
it
into her own. What?
Which is why it hurt so much for
yeah.
her.
Oh, yeah, it really hurt. Even though you could clearly see that she is actually in love with Jim. But Jim was not ready for that yet, and neither was she. And, you know, yes, they're basically co-parents. Even as just friends. But, you know, it's just... the timing is everything. So when the timing was right, they actually did get together. And I really liked that we do get that slow burn. Yes, the scene of them smoking together and remembering high school.
If I speak about Jopper, season 2, I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, I will go down with this ship.
Oh, yeah.
I will go down with this ship.
Yep. Oh, that's why Titanic's your favorite movie?
Maybe. Just put Joyce and Jim on top of the Titanic. That's me next to them.
God.
That's an edit.
That is an edit. I'll remember that one. Joyce and Bob were such an interesting example this season of like somebody in a relationship that is healing from a trauma, and that other person is like helping them heal in a certain way, versus Nancy and Jonathan, which, you know, very, very perfectly put by Murray. That sweet, sweet trauma bond. That shared trauma is what connects them and is the only thing holding them together. That is the basis of their relationship. That is the only reason they're together, truly, and that is also why they are growing apart. Because especially in season 4, they were literally just each other's trauma buddies. That's it. That is quite honestly it. Sure, there was probably, something more emotionally, but especially with Nancy, I mean, Nancy was in a bad way. And yes, she got together with Steve after season 1, but Steve's way of healing from trauma was just ignoring it, and that was not really the vibe for Nancy.
Yeah,
it's not the healthiest thing.
Jonathan and Nancy had the same way of coping as opposed to Steve, who has a different way of coping with everything, because he also like mentions that his dad is abusive or a jerk. And his best thing is to just drink, party, just pretend he's an actual teenager instead of like letting everything else ruin that for him. So he actually wants to enjoy his adolescence.
Yeah.
But Nancy is much more mature, and she definitely wants to handle it in a more mature way. But that also comes in between like living her life, because she's so focused on this trauma and she just wants to do everything she can to solve it and to bring justice.
And the guilt.
Yeah. But also like Steve recognizes, hey, we signed a lot of papers. We can't really talk about shit.
But they do find a way around it. They do. But that is the thing with Nancy. And I think that it was such a good setup for how she does eventually go to the Hawkins Post and does eventually like blossom as a journalist, because that's truly where her character is going. Like I have no doubts that season 5 will end with her being, I don't know, 20 years into the future working for CNN or some shit, or the Washington Post. Like I genuinely see that. This is a kind of cringe, perhaps, but it is where I see her character going. And I don't know, she just has more of a sense of responsibility than Steve does in season 2. Steve is much more, I suppose, like small picture minded, a little bit more family oriented. Hence, he is so protective of Dustin and his adopted kids eventually.
World's greatest babysitter. Let's talk about it. Okay, Dustin and Steve were born. The dynamic was born this season.
The bromance.
It's wonderful. It's beautiful. Sadie Sink was introduced this season as Max. Better Maxine. Max. Let's go with it. Great dynamic. I like that in season 3 we see that evolve between her and Eleven, because this season was very kind of misogynistic with the whole like competitive nature between the two of them that Mike basically instills, because he's just jealous of another girl joining their party. But we fixed that in season 2, so that's great.
It was also, it felt like it was misogynistic for a reason, because again, this is also children in the 80s. And it's very much a normal thing for kids to go through. And, 11 just, immediately going towards jumping to, oh, that's an enemy. But I do love that they actually blossom in season 3 and they actually see each other as friends and, as fellow women.
That whole scene when they're at the junkyard. Love it. Lucas and Sadie, like Lucas and Max blossoming. Love that. Freaking Dustin with Dart. Trying to impress Maxine.
D'Artagnan, which is a D&D, another D&D name. It is, I believe, a name from the Feywild. So, of course, he named this interdimensional slug of something from the Feywild. I just think that's funny.
Yeah, that then turns out to be a demodog. And Jurassic Park vibes when the whole fucking lab goes dark.
Ooh, yes.
And Bob, because he's the one like, you don't know basic. Do you want me to teach you French and German while you're at it? Like, pop off, Bob.
Yeah.
But the sad moment is that the Jurassic Park vibes with the velociraptors, with the demodogs. What can I say? Bob dies.
We lose a simp.
For simping. He dies because he simped too close to the sun. Dude was literally home free. Yeah. He was out.
Yeah.
That door was gonna hold if he had gotten to the front door. But he saw Joyce and he was so relieved and he simped.
He simped.
Then he was attacked.
He simped, he limped, and then he dipped.
And then Jim tried to help, but then all the other ones showed up and it was nah, he's gone. And that is so sad.
Yeah. And then, that's kind of like cementing the trope of the Duffer Brothers. Introducing...
You have a B name? You did.
Yep. Honestly,
Bob.
if you're a new character,
Barb. Benny. There's a pattern here. Who hurt you, Duffer brother?
Betty
Benny.
Bunsen.
Benny.
But honestly, it's that trope of like introducing a new character. If you're new to Stranger Things and you are like a fan favorite, you're gonna die, and that's it. I'm shocked Max is still alive, and I think she should have died in season 4, versus what they did to her. But we'll get to that in the season 4 episode.
That's a tease. That's a teaser. Because está fuerte la cosa. No está rara la cosa.
Está fuerte.
Está fuerte la cosa
That's rough,
con
buddy.
Max.
Oh yeah.
But, you know, Betty Bunsen.
Betty Bunsen.
They really did that on purpose. Like, he doesn't have a B name. He's not gonna die. And then, like, psych, he did. But going back, Bob died for being a simp. Billy. Freaking Billy. Billy! Another B name! Season 3, sorry.
Eddie Munson was really just the odd one out.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I don't know what's the logic there.
That's crazy.
I know. I just want to talk.
Duffer Brothers, what's up? I mean, I know that they don't think everything through, because imagine having to like re-edit your earlier seasons, so that shit makes sense.
But honestly, I think that's like going back in a full circle moment. Season 2 is one of my favorites because there is intention there. Season 3 and 4 definitely feel like their own things that is kind of like adding more to the world than continuing it. Because season 2 is like a clear thread. When you watch season 1 and season 2 right after the other, it follows. Because season 1, I mean, when Will throws up the slug and everything, there is a connective tissue there. But yeah, Billy gets his comeuppance after beating up our baby boy Steve, who then is like, "Stop the car!" Which I love. I loved rewatching the season because then I went, like, after I hadn't rewatched the seasons as I usually do before season 4. So doing this now, after watching season 4, when Steve says, like, "You're not driving my car again" to Max, I didn't catch that when I watched season 4. But then in this one, I'm like, right, dude was straight up traumatized that this redhead was driving her brother's car.
Yep.
At the speed of light, because that car vrooms.
It vrooms.
It vrooms.
It's vrooming.
Yeah, I mean, Billy almost, like, again, horrible, because the whole point of Stranger Things is, like, you have the mythological, like, otherworldly villains and, like, antagonistic force, and then you have the real forces and, like, the real antagonistic forces in life, and Billy was one of them. And, yeah, dude almost literally ran over the kids.
He really did. I mean, the humans are the real monsters.
Humans are the real monsters.
It's Ryan Murphy moment. Ryan Murphy moment.
And Guillermo del Toro with Nightmare Alley.
Oh my god, yeah. Jesus.
But yeah, closing up, if I'm looking at my phone, is because I have notes.
It's for a reason. It's a tool, because we are focused. We are professionals. And honestly, it was so much fun rewatching season 2.
Yeah.
Again, we already mentioned our MVP. Will.
Yeah, shout out to Dr. Owens, Paul Razor. I thought he was really great in this season.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm glad we got him again in season 4. I remember a lot of people were happy to see him again, and I was one of those people.
I was one of those people who was like, who the fuck is that?
Who the fuck is that?
I didn't remember him.
Introduce the clip there.
Yes. I was like, wait a minute.
Who the fuck is that?
And I had to Google him. It was bad. It was bad. I'm like, oh my god, who is this? And then I rewatched season 2, and I'm like, oh shit.
And it's so good that he's there in season 4, because he's a really good buffer between Eleven and Papa.
Papa, can you hear me?
But yes, last 2 points. My favorite season that I hinted at earlier, my favorite moment of the season, is when Will is tapping the chair and they're playing Should I Stay or Should I Go? And they're trying to, like, remind him of who he is, so they can, like, destroy, like, or defeat the Mind Flayer. So that's my favorite moment of the season. What is yours?
Ooh, it's gonna be silly. I really love the moment where Hopper is in the tunnels. I believe it's at the end of episode 4, between episode 4 and episode 5, where he's alone in the tunnels, and he tries to dig himself out. It was giving very much aliens. yeah, he tries to dig himself out, and I'm like, okay, go off, Uma Thurman, Kill Bill, trying to dig yourself out of the ground. Look at you. Oh, and you failed. Okay, cool. And then, you know, he gets wrapped up, and it's giving, you know, alien vibes again. But I did get a little Kill Bill there.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I just really like that sequence because it is, again, I really like when Stranger Things just really lets loose on being very eerie and just like keeping the stakes high because they
Yeah.
only have 8 episodes to
Yeah.
do this.
And also this season just popped off, like they got a bigger budget, which it bothered me a little bit because the practical effects on the first season were so endearing. And then this time when Eleven is running down the hallway at the school and the vines don't look the same as in the first one because
Right.
it's CGI. They're not actually there. And or maybe they are, but you know, you can tell the difference.
Yeah, they look
And-
more fake.
Yeah, especially when Joyce and Jim are walking around the Upside Down in season 1. It just looks like you could feel it. You
There
can
was
touch
texture.
it. And that's that thing. But the music definitely, like,
Oh yeah.
everything that makes Stranger Things like was cemented in season 2. The music, the visuals,
The synthy score.
yeah, the synthy score when they're preparing for the junkyard. That song,
Yeah.
so good. And yeah, I guess the other thing is that this season also like very much cements the whole Dungeons and Dragon aspect, especially in episode 8 when 11 shows up at the house and they're all holding different weapons and like Mike has something that looks like a chalice, Lucas has his little slingshot, and Nancy has a gun, of course. So each of them have something that represents what their class might be on Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna close like with this. I'm gonna like make a little chart of like who's
Yeah.
whose class is what. I'm gonna think on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody has already done it, but I'm gonna do my take.
I googled and there are some charts, but they don't have all the characters. Like I couldn't find one for
Ooh.
Nancy.
Nancy's an artificer.
Yeah.
Full stop. She is my
Someone-
steampunky weapons queen.
Someone
She's
put
crafty.
Dustin as an artificer.
Really?
Yeah.
I could see that. Okay. I can see he's either like an artificer or a warlock. Like a little bit
Yeah.
of both. A little bit of both. Lucas, I feel, could be the rogue.
I know Erica was also a rogue, and someone put Nancy as a rogue in one.
Perhaps.
But yeah, they're out there.
Yeah. We'll think on it
You'll
because
do
I
a
think
better
it's
one.
fun. We were at the movie today. We were at a film festival today, and we saw the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves poster, and we were like, hey! I'm excited. Is it probably going to be super cringe? Perhaps, but
Maybe.
so is Dungeons and Dragons.
Chris Pine is in there. He's a bard. We're fine. It's
That's
fine.
all that matters. So,
But
yeah. Who did you identify with this season?
So we both agree Santa character Noah Schnapp.
Oh, yeah.
Quick follow up is probably Sean Astin. So those two.
Oh, yeah.
I related the most to Dustin this season.
Dustin.
A little boy with a little crush.
He's just so precious. I see so much of myself in Dustin. And I'm like, you're so sweet. You're so kind-hearted. Yeah, I don't want to really copy you, but I feel like I do. Like, I genuinely just kept falling, because Dustin's my favorite character. Like, I kept falling in love with Dustin as a character. So I really did see myself in him this season. But honestly, Eleven's journey, and I think that's also, we can close on defending episode 7. Episode 7 is crucial to 11's development.
Yeah.
Episode 7 really allows 11 for the first time to exist in the world on her own.
Be her own person.
She's being her own person, and that allowed her to finally put into perspective the importance of her friends and family, because nobody's gonna save her, but she can save them. And that's when she finally learns, a little bit of maturity, responsibility. She feels responsible for these people, because at the end of the day, even though she doesn't really remember it,
they took her in. It's the least she can do.
It's the least she can do, and she kind of caused this,
Mm-hmm.
at
So
the
it's
end
like
of the
also
day.
accepting responsibility in general, not just for these people, but for what she has done, which wasn't even on purpose. Again, it just
course.
all circles back to the whole abuse that she experienced in the lab as a minor, being taken advantage of by these people, to be poked and prodded like a lab rat.
Yep.
But she also gets to connect with her mother, who has suffered the same punishments through these people, but obviously through to a bigger effect. So I think we are episode 7 defenders. I
Yeah.
love season 2.
It's a solid season.
If you don't like it because of episode 7, I will not accept your argument.
Honestly, and you know, watching episode 7, I'm like, yeah, I can get that it can feel a little bit slow because it is so focused on her.
Also,
you
end on the Demodogs freaking infiltrating the lab, about to infiltrate it, and
it's
you're
a
like,
good ending to that episode.
we need to go back.
Yeah.
But also, like, I can understand, like, watching it the first time, it must be very jarring. But having the knowledge that I have now, I just go back and I'm like, okay, it's time to chill and hang out with 11 and these punk rockers.
Yeah, I think it really goes to show that even with a limited episode run, it is possible to tell a complete story. It is possible to tell a balanced narrative. Take notes, Disney Marvel Plus. Take notes. Anyways, where can they find you, Josie?
You can find me at the Josie Marie on Twitter and Letterboxd.
And you can find me at Captain Melendez on Twitter and Letterboxd. And you can subscribe and follow Film Talk on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen or watch podcasts. And you can follow us on Twitter at Film Talk. Before we go, what are you most looking forward to with season 3?
Alexi, I'm ready. I love having
Alexi.
I love having my heart broken, apparently, because that death also, like, freaked me out.
Yeah.
Like, Alexi. They make us love characters and then they kill them.
They really
do.
do.
I guess the fashion, the mall. I really love the mall. Freaking Scoops Ahoy, everything. I love the aesthetic of season 3, so I'm happy to just jump into that again.
I'm excited. And I'm excited to record it, and I'm excited to talk about it and share it with all you guys. If you all have been listening along, watching along, and rewatching with us, let us know in the comments. Who was your MVP of season 2? Are you an episode 7 defender? Who do you relate to the most? And what are you most excited for when rewatching, or if you already rewatched season 3? What's your favorite part of season 3? Or what's your favorite part of season 2? What are you most excited for season 3? There we go. Let us know in the comments below, respectfully. Stay tuned every week. We have 2 episodes left of this wonderful series, and I hope that you all are enjoying it. And if you want more, again, be sure to check out our channel and check out everything else that we have going on. In the meantime, stay spooky.
And stay frosty, boys.
Stay frosty, boys.